Well, it's a great mystery. Does the Bible tell us about a cycle of years that reveals the ups and downs of the stock market? Does it reveal the course of nations? Does it reveal depressions and difficult days and days of blessing? Is there such a cycle? And if so, how do we find out about it? Well, there's a book written by our good friend Jonathan Cahn called The Mystery of the Shemitah, and it talks about this cycle. And I think you want to find out what he's got to say. So it's a pleasure right now to show you and introduce to you the man who wrote the book called The Harbinger that has sold 2.5 million copies, Jonathan Cahn.
Is it possible that there exists an ancient mystery that lies behind the events of modern times that determines the rise and fall of the stock market and the economy, the rise and collapse of nations, the destruction of empires and superpowers, a mystery more than 3,000 years old, and yet that determines global cataclysms, the timing of world wars, the atomic age, the Cold War, the attack of 9/11, and more? Could a mystery revealed in a Middle Eastern mountain ordain the rise of America and what may be its coming fall? Could this ancient mystery given to a nation of shepherds be so precise that it has ordained and determined the timing of the greatest collapses in Wall Street history, down to the year, the month, the date, and the hours? What if we could know the future? Could there exist a mystery going back to ancient times that's been affecting, even molding our lives from the days we were born? From events of global proportions to the state of our bank accounts, our past, our present, and our future. And what does it foretell concerning what is yet to come? What is this mystery? It's called the mystery of the Shemitah.
Of that interesting book, Jonathan Cahn is back with us to talk about that mystery of the Shemitah. Jonathan, it's so good to see you.
Always a blessing.
God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about cycles, and we'll just act like from the beginning.
Yes.
There was known, of course, a 50-year cycle where they had a jubilee at the end of 50 years where they released all debts and the slaves were free, et cetera, et cetera. But you have found a cycle within the 50 that is 7 years. And how do you know when it starts?
Well, a few things. First of all, the Jubilee cycle is actually geared to the Shemitah cycle. It says after 7 Shemitahs comes the Jubilee, ushers in the Jubilee. Well, we know, we don't have a record of when the Jubilee was celebrated in the times of Messiah, but we do know when the Shemitah was celebrated.
How do we know that?
We have it from the rabbinic writings. We have it from the first century, or the writings of the time of the Second Temple. We know it. So it's standard in Judaism. This is the day, this is the time. We know when the Shemitahs are.
When does it start and when does it end?
Well, you mean this one?
Yeah. Let's take this one.
Okay. Well, yeah. This one started in September of 2014. Is coming to a head next week, or this coming weekend, actually. And the thing is, the Shemitah, for those that God says every 7 years you'll have a Sabbath year, and this is the Shemitah. We rest, nothing, economic cessation. On the last day of that Shemitah is an extraordinary thing. It's called Elul 29. All debts are wiped out, credits wiped out, the financial accounts of the nation are wiped clean. And this is to be a blessing, Pat. But what happens when Israel turns away from God, the blessing turns into a sign of judgment. When they were taken into Babylon, it was 70 years of judgment. It says, according to the times of the Shemitah, the land shall rest, according to the Sabbath. So could this actually, this pattern that God wove, could this actually be in effect now, or could it manifest at times?
Well, they rested their fields. In other words, they didn't plant anything for a whole year.
Yes.
But how'd they get food?
They had, well, they said the Lord would provide. He says at the end of 6 years, he'll bless you. If you're following God, he's going to bless you before. Yeah. And listen, it would be a blessing to have your debts wiped away too. But when they turn away from God, the whole thing turns around. And so if you look, amazing thing is, if you look at the last 50 years, I'll give you an example. 1966 year, the Shemitah stock market collapses. 1973 year, the Shemitah stock market collapses, leads to a global recession. 1980, you have recession, and then the stock market collapses after. You have 87 stock market collapses in the Shemitah of that, and you have Black Monday, the worst percentage crash in history. Shemitah of 1994, the bond market collapses, called the bond market massacre, greatest in history. 2001, you have the stock market collapsing, recession, you have the greatest point crash in world history, and you have 9/11, which is the shaking of America. The Shemitah also means shaking. And then you have 2008, which is the last one. Right. What do you have? The greatest collapse since the Great Depression, the greatest one-day point crash in world history. Yeah. So every single one, and this even extends to the Great Depression. So the thing is that, so here it's happening, and the other thing, Pat, is that this phenomenon appears to have been intensifying. If you look at the last two, we've touched on this, but the last in the 21st century, you have two major shakings. You have 9/11, and then you have the global collapse.
The market has been sick. It's fallen down pretty badly. Is this it, or is more coming?
It could. Well, here's the thing: is that you know, right now at the end of this, we're approaching that climax time. That's that Elul 29 time. I would be watching. I would certainly be watching this. Now the thing is that it's happened every time, and the last two have happened on the exact days. On Elul 29, on the day you have in 2001 the greatest collapse, on the day that God appointed for the wiping out of financial accounts. On 2008, you have the greatest collapse on the exact same day, Elul 29. I mean, this is down to the day, the hour.
It's amazing that something that's a Hebrew thing would control the world. That's what you're saying. Yes. It would control the economies of the world.
It's a God thing, because God works through that Hebrew thing. And ultimately a Hebrew person's going to control the world, which is Messiah, Yeshua. So it makes sense. Now the interesting thing is that so we are heading to now in this year, in the last Shemitah period. At the beginning, there were actually signs of what would happen at the end. There was the first collapse of a bank at the beginning, the opening day. This is the last one. Right. And then at the end with that. Well, were there any this time? Interesting. When the Shemitah began this time, that all of a sudden Wall Street started reeling violently last September. It happened the opening week of the Shemitah, lasted about a month. Could that be a foreshadow? Another thing that happened was, I mean, the word Shemitah in Hebrew doesn't just mean a release. It also means shaking. Right. And it's not only the economic realm, it can affect bigger realms. Well, you had people didn't realize, you had an earthquake that struck America, 6 on the Richter scale, on the opening day of the Shemitah. And then now this is far out, but this is good, and that is that there's a sign, Pat, that God gave of the first warning of an economic fall, in a sense. The first cycle is actually in Genesis, when you have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. The warning he gave was the dream to Pharaoh of 7 cows, each one is a year, and then 7 bad cows, each one is a year. So you got the number 7, you got the figure of a cow. Now here's a far out thing. What happened is, last September, a cow was born, literally. The AP, not a Christian organization, takes the image of that cow, spreads it across America, and I think they have that image. That image is a cow literally born with a number 7 on its head.
There it is.
7 on its head. The AP goes across America, released her, and it happened. What day? September 25th. That's released. That's the opening day of the Shemitah, the sign of the 7th year on the opening day. Now another cow was born in Texas, and as a Christian farmer, the calf is born. It's a red heifer. Something strange about the red heifer, and I have a picture. That is a second cow with a number 7, born on the same day, September 25th, the opening day of the Shemitah. This is the biblical sign. Now, the thing is that in 1973, you had the Shemitah that led to a different kind of fall. You had not only economy, you had a spiritual fall. America legalizes the killing of its unborn children. This is major. This year, 2015, has been just as significant. Something very major has happened. And this is very significant, and that is, in the Bible, one of the signs that precedes judgment is the act of desecration. Ezekiel's taken to the temple of God, and he's shown idols all over the temple, and God says judgment's coming. In Daniel's in Babylon, the king says, we're going to take the vessels of the temple of Jerusalem, the holy vessels, and we're going to drink from them, and we're going to drink to the gods. At that moment, the hand appears, handwriting on the wall, this night is judgment. So the act of desecration precedes judgment. Desecration is to take something made for God, to turn it against its purposes, and turn it against God. Well, another vessel holy of consecration is marriage. Marriage is of God. It is his vessel. If you take that vessel vessel and you turn it against its purposes and turn it against God's purposes, it's an act of desecration. About 2 months ago, America crossed the line. The Supreme Court strikes down marriage as we know it. Right. Act of desecration. All across America, this is celebrated with a sign of the rainbow. The rainbow doesn't belong to man or an organization of man. The rainbow, it belongs to God. It is his holy, holy vessel. Right. And yet to take the rainbow and use that as a celebration of this first desecration is a double desecration. And then that night, Pat, remember with Babylon, it happens in the palace, the highest house of Babylon, on the wall. Well, that night, the White House, the highest house in the land, puts up the sign of the rainbow on literally the White House becomes a vessel of desecration celebrating this. This is a triple desecration. And what is the rainbow? The rainbow is a sign of God's covenant. It's a sign linked to judgment and mercy. And so to twist that, to turn that on its head, how much more can we do to provoke God in this hour? And so here we have, they have the handwriting in Babylon. Now you have the handwriting appears on the White House, on the walls of the White House, in the color of the rainbow. So this, and you say, how can we get any worse than that? We crossed the line. Well, right now there's a woman in jail now. Now, and this is another sign. In the Bible, you actually had, before judgment came, you had prophets in jail. You had Jeremiah in jail when the thing came. It's a sign, the prophets cried out. They said, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Right. Well, it's happening now. And so here, and they're calling her defiant. It's not, she's not defiant. It's America that's defiant. Woe to those who call obedience defiance and defiance obedience. So we are in a very dangerous period on top of the fact that the Shemitah is coming in this time. So I believe it's like a perfect storm, all these things coming together.
Something else, there's a special moon that's coming. There's an eclipse. Yes. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is, for those who watch the blood moon, this is the blood moons. And the blood moon period actually began, it's been a 1.5 year period, which a year of it has been the year of the Shemitah. It's a tetrad. 4 blood moons in a row happened in 1967, when around the time of Jerusalem getting back. Happened in around 1948, 49, 50, around the time of the rebirth of Israel. Also happened in around 1492, 93, 94, when big thing in American history and in Jewish history with Spain. Well, it's coming to its conclusion. All these things are converging. I mean, I would say, and again, I'm not dogmatic, I'm not a date setter, but I'm kind of forced in the situation, and that is that we are watching the elements of a perfect storm. Number one, you have America in apostasy right now. Number two, we have now offered 57 million children. And that's what Israel was judged for. It's about 57 million now. Israel was judged for thousands. We have millions, and not only it's revealed right now that we have been harvesting them. Now, even Israel didn't do that. That's number three. You have the Abrahamic covenant, America and Israel. And that's been the saving grace. We blessed Israel, but now our relations are at the worst point in the history of America and Israel. Number four, the harbingers, the signs of the warning of judgment on nation have appeared. Number five, since I was here last time, the harbingers haven't stopped. They've continued, a sign of progression. Number six, I would say the act of desecration just happened. Number seven, the Shemitah happened at the same time. Number eight, one of the signs of a nation out of God's will is debt. You shall, and one of the things that the Shemitah does, the Shemitah actually affects debt. So it's actually, if you look at the statistics, the years of the Shemitah the dynamic is strongest when there's high debt. We are astronomical. We have a house of cards of debt right now. Number nine, the tower. That last harbinger we spoke about a time ago has now the symbol of the defiance. So we will rebuild higher. So is now reached its completion, is being completed at the same time that America is at its greatest depth of apostasy. Number 10, is that now America has signed a deal with Iran and is pushing it on Israel, and Israel has said, don't do this, it's putting us in danger. Well, the Abrahamic covenant says, whatever you do to Israel will come back at you. So if we what happens if the American government puts Israel in danger, what shall happen to America? If America, the president said we're going to reassess our relationship with Israel, well, what will God reassess with America? So another danger. And then you have the timing. It's not just the Shemitah. We're approaching the end of the Shemitah. This is the climactic time here now. And again, I'm not dogmatic, but here we are at this time. The template of the harbinger is the nation that's warned, if it doesn't turn back, heads to apostasy and judgment. We're watching this happen now. So we are now heading to this time. What's what's going to come. And I'll say this, because I'm always asked, I believe a great shaking is coming to America and the world, but America. I believe shaking is coming that will strike the financial realm, economic realm, and even be a shaking that's greater than that. And one of the things is that the word I said, the Shemitah, can mean collapse, fall. It's not just behind economies. You can chart the rise of America by it, rise and fall of nations, global cataclysm. So the thing is, now the thing is, I will say this: shakings can happen in the man-made shakings. You can have terrorism. It can also be natural. The shaking of the earth, happens. So now, as far as timing, people are always asking, and I give a caution, and that is this: God doesn't have to do anything. God is sovereign. I want to reverence that. He doesn't have to do He doesn't have to do anything. I can come. I'm back this next week after this. Nothing has to happen. It could be very uneventful. I don't think so. I think, but the thing is that, so it doesn't. On the other hand, it could happen around this time. Coming up, significant dates. We're approaching the 14th anniversary of 9/11 this Friday. Then Elul 29, the last two times it's been that, is coming this Sunday. That's September 13th. Okay. Now, it's not a stock market day. The future markets are open, but it's not. But it can mean it's not happening, but it can also mean that a shaking happens in another realm. And it doesn't have to happen at the exact time. Then you have the 10 days of awe. Very important. I know it's so important for TBN. I actually came to the Lord during that, watching TBN. I'm watching CBN. I was watching the 700 Club. Okay. And so the thing is that these are the days in the Bible that are the days of repentance. It begins with the Feast of Trumpets. The moment the sun goes down on Elul 29, the wipeout day, the trumpets are sounded. That's the Feast of Trumpets. Right. But in Hebrew, the Feast of Trumpets is called Yom HaDin, which means the Day of Judgment. So these days have always been associated with judgment, always. Then you have Yom Kippur. This is September 23rd. That, we once talked about it, but you talk about the Jubilee. There's a prophetic Jubilee where things happen on the Jubilee. The restoration of the land of Israel happened on this prophetic Jubilee following the year of a Shemitah. 7 Shemitahs later, you have the restoration of Jerusalem in the cycle. Well, this cycle is coming to a head now, begins September 2015, the Jubilee cycle, prophetic. Each time it has meant war. Each time it has meant war with Israel involved. And each time it's resulted in a prophetic end-time restoration. Now, it doesn't have to happen at the beginning, but the day it starts always is Yom Kippur. That's September 23rd. So it goes till 2016 September. So you got a whole period. So you have what I believe, you have a dangerous period. Now, God is sovereign, but it's a dangerous period. I believe we need to be ready.
Do you see, Sonny, you remember that thing that happened over there in Indonesia? It was, as I recall, that terrible flooding that went...
the tsunami.
So wasn't that on a Sunday? At least over there, it was Monday, but here... you reckon we might have something like that, a terrible earthquake? Or?
Well, I would say this. Again, with my caution, God doesn't have to do anything. I'd be ready for anything. The word Shemitah means shaking, and that can be shaking of all these realms, including that. And I believe in people, will say, they get scared. And I'm saying, don't be scared. Here's the thing. They say, well, how can I be safe? What's the safest place in America? Well, the safest place in America, I found out, is called the will of God. Wherever you are, get to that place. If there are people here and they're in the Lord, the time is now to get things right, not later. And whatever in your life, deal with it now, get right. And if somebody's watching and they're not saved and they're saying, well, how do I be saved? A good thing. In Hebrew, the word for safety is Yeshua. And Yeshua is Jesus. He's our safety. He's our rock. Outside of him, there's no safety. Inside of him, there's no fear.
What you're saying is these things are crowding together, all these signs. And this Sunday might be the apex, the crucial moment when
it could be. Nothing can happen, or it could happen. Yes, you can have it. You can have a shaking, and yes, it could this weekend and heading onward.
Well, Sunday here is actually Monday over some other place.
Yeah. Well, actually, the stock market opens up in Australia and those places Sunday night. Actually, 5 p.m. here, and there's something in New York called the Forex. So actually, the markets are going to be open at 5 o'clock. When sundown comes, that's Elul 29. That's the apex right there, and that's when the trumpets begin. Last times to the second.
If there was a great break in Japan, a great break in Australia, a great break in China, it could come.
Even that, yes. Even there can be an overlap of the stock market. So it could be in every realm. I would say this. Here are the key dates. Again, for someone who's not a date setter, I'm going into all these dates. But the thing is that. But I put it in the book. But the thing is that if it doesn't, I would say this: either way, we are, right now, this nation is racing to judgment. If the shaking doesn't happen then, it's going to happen after.
The debt is insupportable. You talk about $18 trillion of just immediate debt, but the off-balance sheet stuff is well over $100 trillion.
That's right. In the Bible, it says, if you follow me, you will lend to many nations and you will not borrow. So now America was the greatest creditor nation in the world. It's a sign of blessing. It actually happened when America rose during World War I, which was actually the 1917 year of the Shemitah. America enters the war, emerges the most powerful nation on earth, and the greatest creditor nation. Well, as we've been falling away from God as a culture, it has shifted from being the greatest creditor nation. We are now the greatest debtor nation. That's a sign in the Bible. And what I noticed after I wrote the book, the Shemitah, I noticed that there's two periods of time when the Shemitah, the cycle is the strongest. Sometimes it's not strong. Sometimes it is. They are the 1930s, and they are from the 1970s till now. And the two things about those periods are those are the periods of the greatest debt in the history of America. The 1930s, Great Depression happens, and all those things happen, and the debt is the greatest. And from this point on, and that's when it's been the cycle. So we need to be ready.
Jonathan, I wish we had another 5 hours, but unfortunately we're on television and our time has run out. Folks, this is called The Mystery of the Shemitah. You can get it wherever books are sold. It's a tremendous book, but boy, this is frightening. I don't know, frightening, but we're in the hand of God, so He's in control. But just recognize the fact, if you're not right with Him, now's the time to get right with Him. You don't want to come into this period of shaking and your life isn't right with God. And Jonathan, God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. God bless you, Pat.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Praise the Lord. I wish we had more time, but Jonathan will be back with us after some of this stuff happens, and we'll see how prophetic he was.
Well, it doesn't have to, but God's on the throne.
Well, we leave you to today's Power Minute from Psalms. Give thanks to the God of heaven. His love endures forever. And tomorrow, an eyewitness account